Okay, I'm recording now. We're gonna do a small piece from the Orach Chaim Hakadosh, and this is on Shmos. This is the reading that we're gonna read actually on Shavuos. There's no Parshat Shavua this week because Shavuos is on Friday and on Shabbos. So when we have a Friday and a Shabbos, and it's Yantif, so there's no Torah reading per se, meaning of the Parsha of the week. However, but we'll read from, read from. I mean, would we be in shul? We would read, but we're not going to be in shul. But the Torah reading on the first day is the giving of the Torah at Sinai, chapter 19 in Exodus, which we're going to look at here. And then the second day is the regular Yontif Yisker reading, which is from Parshas Re'eh. You'll forgive me though, I do have to go officiate a funeral, so I'll be a little shorter than normal. I didn't want to cancel today right before Shavuos, but I figured out that if I do a shorter shiur, I could still make it on time and officiate this funeral, which should only be for Simchas, get together for Simchas. So here we go. We start off on chapter 19, if you could see the screen here. B'chodesh hashlishi, l'tzeis b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim, bayom hazeh abo midbar Sinai. On the third month from the exodus of Egypt, on this day they came to the wilderness of Sinai. So again, we know when we count months, we don't say Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev like we learned in school, but rather it's Nisan, Iyar, Sivan. So the third month is Sivan. So on the third month, which makes sense because we just now yesterday had Rosh Chodesh Sivan. So on the third month in Sivan is when the Jewish people came to Sinai, and there was a few days leading up to it. So right now on the calendar, and the second day of the second day of third day of Sivan. I forgot, right, Sunday was Rosh Chodesh. I keep thinking today's Monday. Sunday was Rosh Chodesh, yesterday was Monday, today's Tuesday. Now we start what's called Shloshes Yimei Hagbala, the 3 days of separation or preparation, as is enumerated in the verses here. I'm not going to really get into it, but in other words, there was all this preparatory steps that were taken. You can't just show up at Sinai and get the Torah. You have to purify, you have to be ready, etc., etc., etc. And then the second verse says, "Vayisu me refidim vayavo midbar Sinai vayachanu bamidbar vayichen sham Yisrael neged ahar." They journeyed from Refidim. They entered the wilderness of Sinai, and they encamped in the wilderness. And the Jewish people, it says, Israel camped there opposite the mountain. So the Orach Chaim we're gonna see it inside, but the Orach Chaim has a number of questions, asking, says, first of all, if we're talking about coming to Sinai, why do I need to reference the fact that they came from Egypt? We know where they came from. And if the whole point was to give the Jewish people the Torah, why 3 months? Why do we have to wait so long? That's one. And then second, why the repetition of Ba'o Midbar Sinai? In the first verse, it says that on this day they came to the wilderness of Sinai. And then the next verse says they left Refidim and they came to the wilderness of Sinai. Why the repetition that they left Refidim and then they went to Sinai and they encamped in why that repetition? We just said in the previous verse that they came to the wilderness of Sinai. So we know that if they left Refidim, they came to the wilderness of Sinai. Why the repetition? And thirdly, we find a change in the syntax or in the grammar where it says Vayisu'u me Refidim, they journeyed from Refidim, they in the plural. Vayavo, they came to the wilderness of Sinai, they came in the plural. Vayachanu Bamidbar, they camped in the wilderness, they in the plural. And then Vayichan Sham. And the proper translation of that is Vayichan Sham Yisrael, and Israel, he singular. Israel in the singular camped opposite the mountain. So why does it switch from plural to singular? Those who are sticklers for parallelism, you want to make sure that it's the same throughout one verse. I mean, the next verse you want to change is one thing, but in the same verse, you want to change from plural to singular. So here we're going to look at Orach Chaim Hakadosh. I'm switching the page. You see it on the page? Give me a thumbs up. Chavi, you see it? That I switched? No, I don't want that. I don't want to pop up. Here, I want this. Orach Chaim. You see that? You got it? Okay, good. Thank you, Nicole. Okay. Oh, I love all the thumbs coming up. It's so exciting to me. Vayisu me Refidim. Now, this is from Sefaria. By the way, this has been a great resource. I've used this for a long time for teaching and for making sheets, etc. but especially now in the digital age that we find ourselves, the digital age of Corona, that we, for Torah teachings and texts, they have a tremendous amount of resources available on there. And this translation, I believe, comes from Rabbi Monk's translation, and it's fairly good. Even though that Art Scroll has now redone the complete set of Orach Chaim, it now comes in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 volumes. 10 volumes, the entire Orach Chaim, which is Rav Chaim Ibn Attar, from the early parts of the period of the Acharonim. You can go, if you go to Har Hazesim, if you go to the Mount of Olives, you can see the Orach Chaim's grave right there in the Mount of Olives. A very holy Jew who died in Israel. Anyway, so his commentary, which is usually quite long on a lot of the verses, but super deep. So here we go. I'm going to read the Hebrew, follow along in the English as you would like. Kasha. Lama ichar hamuktam ki pasuk zeh hayelo lahaktim kodem pasuk shalafanav she'amar bo midbar Sinai. He says, this is the question we just asked. In the second verse, it says they went from Rephidim and they came to Sinai. That should have been in the previous pasuk. Or in the previous verse, we already said they came to the wilderness of Sinai. Why are you going backwards and telling me they journeyed from Rephidim to Sinai? Ve'ulai shehu al derech omram, and he quotes the Gemara in Sanhedrin, ahava mekalkelas ashur lahaktim hamauchar. Maybe the Talmud says, and this is quite a good line, by the way, which we say all the time, ahava mekalkelas es ashura, that love, we say love is blind, or we say love corrupts all judgment. You know, we could speak to Miriam. Miriam's getting married soon, and she's in the Google Gaga stage, I hope, you know, and it's really great things. And you're gonna do, especially now when you can't even, have a normal sort of engagement period, and it makes you do crazy things. I think back of when we were engaged, we were dating, and like the things that I did then, I would never dream of doing it now. Like, are you crazy? Who has that kind of time? But when, it's like the need to sleep or the need to do anything, sort of, is corrupted in a very good way, because we say ahava mekalkelas es ashura, that love, it doesn't make you think, it makes you sugar. There's no other way to say it. In Italian, they call that being falipt. Shalios ki hu ze yom hamekaveh leborei latorah laolam le'elyonim letachtonim umyom habriya v'hem yoshim u'mitzapim masay yavo b'nei Yisrael midbar Sinai. And he says, because of this love, that the Jewish people are accepting the Torah, and this was being waited for since the creation of the world. The whole purpose of creation was so that we can come to this point. So we can get to this point where the Jewish people can receive the Torah. And that's a very strong belief that we have, that the whole purpose of our existence, and perhaps the whole purpose of the creation of the world, was to get to that point in time in the year 2448 of the Common Era, not the Common Era, I mean the way we're counting years, the way we count from creation, 2448 from creation, I mean, that from creation, the year 2448, which we're now in the year 5780, so do the math, and we're still talking about it, and we're still celebrating it, but that was the pinnacle of, or that was the purpose of creation, says the Orach Chaim. Seder hadavar, take up kadma hadav omer bayom hazeh bo. Higia chashok v'nechshak lechoshek v'chashok v'simcha shemayim v'aretz ki zeu tachlis habriya v'tikvasa v'achar kach chazar hakasel l'odiyah pratim shadvar. In other words, like they're so excited to get there that this is what it's about. That's why it says bayom hazeh, on this day they came to Sinai. Meaning, and he says, look at the translation, the arrival describes the meeting of the lover and his beloved. Heaven and earth both rejoiced that this day had arrived at last. All right, okay, then I'll go, okay, well, let's get into details. This is where we came from, how we got here. But the point is that we're here now. We're really super excited that we are here now at Sinai, able to accept the Torah. Orach Chaim continues, Od yirtze beheir od omro v'yavo midbar Sinai. He says, and since the Torah says that they came to the wilderness of Sinai, we just said that they came to the wilderness of Sinai. He says, also, why does it have to say they encamped there? Obviously, if they're there, they're staying there, they're situated there, they're in the desert, that's what you do in the desert. I mean, I don't know, I don't go to the desert much, but I'm guessing that when you go to the desert and you're 3 million people, that's what you do, you camp there. Okay. So if that's the case, achein kavanas hakasav hu lakaktim gimel inyanim him ikrei ha'achana lekabbalas haTorah. So then the Ohr HaChaim says, therefore, there are three notes that we want to point out, which are essential for preparing to accept the Torah. Shebe'emtza usam nisrata Hashem lahanchilam nachla shakai hitorasenu hanaima. That this is, with these three steps, then we know that we are able to entrust the Torah to the Jewish people, as he writes, as an eternal inheritance. So the formulation of these verses, albeit in their odd form, are there to teach us that there are things that are required so that we can be ready to accept the Torah. And the reason I say it now, because as we're here before Shavuos, we have to always remind ourselves of these things, and that to make sure that we can all be in the same frame of mind, which perhaps this year, maybe for some it's more challenging, and maybe for some it's actually easier because we have perhaps more time or more ability to focus on certain things, as opposed to on a regular year when, with so much sugar getting Yontif ready. And here it's not like it's just different. What can I tell you? Ha'echad. So here's the first one. His gabrus v'his atzmus be'esa katorah. First thing you have to do, and you like the translation, get a grip on themselves to study Torah diligently. Ki ha'atzlasu esev ha'mafsid hashagasa. Laziness is like a weed which leads one to forfeit whatever achievements and Torah insights one has acquired. And we can certainly know that now, during this period. Anybody who's who hasn't been able to get up and do things, it's ruinous. If you're able to maybe take on new things which you haven't done before, people have taken on, let's say, workout regimens, or sleeping better, eating better, or studying, or reading books, or even if it's something like, there's that series that I always wanted to watch, I never had time to do it. That's something that's, again, it's anti-laziness. But he says laziness, I like the word he writes it, it's a weed which allows you to forget, or causes you to forget. He says, Lazet timsa, ki kol makom sheyaskirenu Hashem leTorah, yidaktek lomar lashon chozek ve'ometz, ad geder simit atzma aleha. Sheyamit atzma aleha. Whenever the Torah, if you look at the beginning, particularly of the book of Yehoshua, when it says, Joshua will go into the land, he says, chazak ve'ematz, chazak ve'ematz. Whenever we talk about Torah, the Ohr HaChaim says, we always use the terms chazak ve'ematz, be strengthened, fortify yourselves. He says, until the point where, ad shiyamis atzmo, until you actually are going to kill yourself over it. Because it says that's what happens when a person, when we talk about Torah study, you have to kill yourself. And we know, by the way, that we make, and when I say Torah, it's not just the study of Torah, but it's also the keeping of the Torah, because the keeping of the Torah can make us sugar about what plate to use and what dish to use, and I have to do it by this time, and I have to finish at that time, and I can't say this, and I got to do that, I have to show, you're making me sugar. Yeah, the answer is yes, that's correct. He says, he actually quotes a sefer that he wrote a long time ago, and he writes, he says, since a person requires great sacrifice, that's why it says they left Refidim. We're not telling you a geographic location for where they traveled. If that's the case, it should have been found earlier before they encamped. Because you don't say, I camped somewhere, I came from there. You say, I left somewhere and I went somewhere. So it should have taken place early. So what's the point of having it out of order? It's saying that they left Refidim and they came to Sinai. It doesn't mean they left a physical place called Refidim, even though there was a place, but it's saying they left the state of Refidim, which is Rifyon Enaim, the state of weakness. They left their weak state and they came to Sinai, which means a strong state. They left their former being dominated as slaves, even though that never really got out of them, as we see certainly in the book of Bamidbar, and that we're reading now. But what happened is, they've left their weak state, now they're ready to commit, which also will explain, by the way, why it took so long. Why does the Torah have to say, B'chodesh HaShlishi? It's not going to happen overnight. They had to go through a process. They had to build up to it. That's the whole concept of Sfiras HaOmer, counting up or counting down to something. And each day we're gaining another. And he'll say, I believe he's going to say here, but we know, and this is a well-known thing, is that there were 50 levels of impurity. And in Egypt, they sunk almost to the bottom of that. Now they have to work their way up. So remove a level, but also get a level of sanctity. So therefore, now that they left Refidim, yes, they left a physical geographic location called Refidim, but they also left the state of Refidim, as the Orach Chaim says. They left the place of weakness. Second thing, the Inyan base, hu hashiflus v'ha'anava. In order to receive the Torah, you have to be humble. You have to be modest. For some people, modesty comes very, very easily. For some people, it's a challenge. But I could tell you this, that, well, I'll finish the paragraph, then I'll explain. Ki ein divrei Torah miskaimen el b'mi shemashvil atzmo mesim atzmo kamidbar. Why does it say they came to the wilderness of the desert? Because Torah can only be accepted, it can only be fulfilled with someone who makes himself like a desert. In other words, completely barren, empty. I have nothing. There's no other ulterior motives. There's nothing. That's why it says ve'achanu b'midbar. Perish loshen shiflos va'anava kamidbar shakol darcham alav. It's like a desert which is empty. You have to be a desert. Everybody the only purpose of the desert is people to walk through it. People walk over you. Now, what I've always understood this Orach Chaim to mean about the desert is that if you've ever really, really studied Torah, and like studied seriously, like if you've ever tried to, you say like, you know what, I'm going to go through all of Chumash and Rashi, or I'm going to go through all of the prophets. I'm going to read through the hard stuff in the back, you know, in Kesuvim, or I'm going to try and learn Gemara. I'm going to try and study Talmud. I'm going to try and study Jewish law, Shulchan Aruch. It is the most humbling thing. It's the most humbling thing in the world when you realize how much you don't know. And it's just for some people, and you see this a lot, especially in yeshivas, when people are studying at a very high intensity level, that it is almost crippling at times. Is that for some people, it becomes, when you realize that there's so much to cover and there's so much that I don't know, it is debilitating. And that's required in the sense that you have to have humility to be able to say, I don't know everything, or I have much that I can learn. And I point this out to you many, many times, that Rashi, the great Rashi, in his commentary on Chumash, Rashi, which is probably the greatest commentary that we have, greatest single commentary on the Bible that we have, on the 5 books of Moses, Rashi a number of times simply writes in a pasuk, Eini Yodea, I don't know. I don't know. Now, he didn't have to write anything. He could have just skipped over. Rashi doesn't comment on every single verse in the Torah. But the fact that Rashi writes, I don't know, it also shows a certain humility to say, wow, if Rashi could say that he doesn't know things, wow, I certainly could say I don't know things. Now, that's not an excuse to say I'm not going to study. And certainly in today's day and age, nobody has an excuse, because you're going to go up to heaven, and the Gemara in Shabbos tells us that they're going to ask you a bunch of questions. And one of the questions they're going to ask you is, did you study Torah regularly? Did you set aside time for study? We don't have an excuse. You can't say, I didn't know, I didn't have the background, In today's day and age, with what's available out there at our fingertips, I say literally at our fingertips, what you could do on this device, right? What you can access to learn and to study, whether you know Hebrew or you don't, whether you have a different language or not, whether you learned before or not, we need to look something up or not, it's all there for you. And you just have to avail yourself of the opportunity, and also the humility, the shiflus, the ability to say, I have a lot that I need to do. That if you could do that, then you'll be able to study. That's basically, by the way, what the entire Pirkei Avos covers. The ethics of our fathers, a lot of it was there to enhance the spiritual embracing of what it means to study Torah and appreciate Torah. The Torah is not just about, milk spoon, meat pot, 24 hours. It's not just about that, but it's about being a good person. It's about having the right attitude, about having the right frame of mind. If you have that right frame of mind, then you'll be able to study even more. And that's what Torah is. It's an entire corpus of not just books and laws, but about an existence of who we are. And that's why it says that's the purpose of the creation of the world. The purpose of the creation of the world is so that we could be people that bring light into the world through the study of Torah. Let's look at the last item, and then we'll bring this all together, God willing. V'inyan Gimel. Hu b'chinas yud chachamim b'hischabris b'lev shalom v'tamim lo shiu bad b'bad shalem amar kosav cher al abadim el yizvadu yachad v'yichadidu zelazeh v'yasbiru panim zelazeh. Part of Torah has to do with unity. It has to do with people coming together to study, which is what we're doing right now. Now, I could easily have, sent the link to this and say, here, read this on your own. But when you do it with someone else, or when the classic model of study, by the way, for years and years and years and generations in yeshiva and beyond, is what's called chavrusa, or as my kids say, chavruta, because when you go to modern Orthodox high school, they don't know how to say sa. I'm such a litvak. It's my kids say, I have a chavruta. Like, what is that? Chavrusa. But a chavrusa, the Gemara says, o chavrusa o misusa. In other words, it's better to have someone to study with than anything else, because either that or death was the term of the Talmud. Meaning, when you study by yourself, that represents a level of hubris, a level of a lack of humility that we saw in the second point of saying, you know what, nobody could teach me anything. I know everything. I don't have patience for someone. Now, by the way, that doesn't mean you can learn with every person. There has to be a certain chemistry. And if you find a good chavrusa, then you're lucky. You're lucky. I'll tell you a very, very personal story, if you don't mind, about my life. Since, it's not fair that we pick on Vivian all the time because about her personal life. So we can talk. I'm going to tell you something personal about me, okay? I said, just to make you blush, by the way, it's worth it. You're going to be sorry you ever turned on that camera, right? Right? No, we're just so when I was in yeshiva, so I was in Israel, 1989, 1990. I was in my second year in Israel after high school. And then some maniac named Saddam Hussein decided that he was going to throw Scud missiles on Israel. Now, my parents were very, very different in like what we should do. Now, by the way, this wasn't the era of the internet and constant news flow and phones. If I wanted to speak to my parents, I had to like make an appointment. They would call me on the payphone in the dorm and whatever. And we had the asimonim. Remember, we discussed that. So my father was like, yeah, stay, it'll be fun, whatever. My mother's like, my parents, by the way, both in the military. My mother's like, my unit might get called. I might have to go to Iraq. I want to see you one last time. Please come home. So she pulled a total guilt card on me. And I came home January of 1999, when right before the Gulf War started. The Gulf War started, I think, January 15th. So I came home right before. And then sure enough, the Scud missiles were flying all over Israel. And we know how that turned out. God had his way with Saddam Hussein. Okay, anyway, I need to find a yeshiva. It's January. I wanted to go to Ner Yisrael. Ner Israel Rabbinical College, which is in Baltimore, Maryland. It's actually in Towson, right outside of Baltimore, but it's in the frum community in Baltimore. But the only problem with going there, and they have hundreds and hundreds, it's a top-level yeshiva. The only problem is that they wouldn't accept somebody in the middle of what's called the Zman, in the middle of the semester, so to say. So I had to wait till after Pesach. I needed to find places to go that would accept me in January. And I wasn't the only one in the boat. There were a number of people that were in this situation. I was not going to YU. I couldn't get into YU. No, that's not true. I had spent 11 years of my life in school in Washington Heights. From already the second grade through high school, I was in Washington Heights. The last place I wanted to go was Washington Heights. So I didn't go to YU. So I looked around at different yeshivas. I end up in Yeshiva Shari Torah in Muncie with Rabbi Wein. And they're nice. I have a nice shiur, a nice group of guys. I'm there. Comes Pesach time. I go down to Baltimore. I take what's called a faher. I take a test to see if they'll accept me into the yeshiva. I get into the top shiur. I went with one of my buddies, and we went, and we looked, and I got accepted right away to the top shiur. And the truth is I didn't love it. wasn't too excited about it. So, and this is why I take my role seriously now, is that I remember that it was a Sunday, and there was a bris or something, and the rabbi of my shul was there, Rabbi Fink. He should live me well. Rabbi Fink, everybody knows Rabbi Fink now because that was ground zero for coronavirus in Yerushalayim back, it seems like 8 years ago, but that was, 3 months ago, right before Purim. And the guy who was, that guy who was the first one in the hospital, Garbuz, his wife, we grew up together. She's from New Rochelle. Adina Lewis is her maiden name, but we grew up together in New Rochelle. But anyway, that's where I grew up. So, and the rabbi was at the bris, and I asked him, and I was very shy, and I didn't, you can imagine that, me being very shy. And I asked the rabbi if I could ride home with him, because we were at a different location, a couple miles away from home. I said, can I ride home with him? I want to talk to you about something. He said, sure. So I go in the car with him, and I said, I want to go to this big league yeshiva is the word that I used, but I'm happy where I am. I like Rabbi Wein. I like it. It's a small place. It's close to home, etc. And he says to me, he says, do you have a shiur? You have a rebbe? I said, yes. He says, you have a chavrusa? I said, yes, I have a great chavrusa. We learned together. We learned very well together. And he said to me, Rebbe, Talmud, chavrusa? He goes, that's a big league yeshiva. He says, if you have that, if you're lucky to find that, why would you go anywhere else? And that was one of the best pieces of advice I ever received in my whole life. And I'm eternally thankful because I ended up staying there for 7 years. And I had the same chavrusa for that amount of time. And I learned so much, and everything I became, or everything that I've done in my life is because of those 7 years that I spent there with Rabbi Wein. And that's such a thing. So that's the concept of chavrusa, is that you have to be able to say, and by the way, and I thought I knew everything then. When I was 19 and 20, nobody could teach me. And I was the smartest guy. I was going to be, and God has a way of humbling you. So he says here that Torah study requires group learning. Chavrusa learning, not single. He says, therefore, even the greatest minds come together. That's why it switches from plural to singular. When the Jewish people came to Sinai, they came as one. And we know the famous line, Rashi says it, Ki'ish echad b'lev echad. One person, one mind, one heart. And I dare say that I'm not sure that that's ever happened since. I don't know that there's been such unity in the Jewish people as that we had at Mount Sinai. We've had times of unified thought. We've had moments of unity, but the entire Jewish people united, it's very, very hard. Even look at what's going on right now. Right now, there's so many different opinions about what the Jews should be doing, about what shuls should be doing, about what schools should be doing, about what Israel versus here, Jewish communities, etc., that it's driving us bananas. Nobody knows whether they're coming or going. But when it comes to Torah, 3 things is that you have to have, he says you have to have, leave aside the weakness. You have to have the strength, the commitment that you're going to study Torah, and to strengthen your resolve to do so. You have to have humility, and you have to have unity. And that's a beautiful way, I think, that we can go into the holiday of Shavuos. And especially in light of what we've been through the last 3 months, you realize that by the time we get back to shul, it will have been a quarter of the year, more than a quarter of the year just off, which is off. I mean, it's bananas when you think about it. And we're going to look back at it, and we're going to ask ourselves, what did we learn from it? What did we learn from it? I think that we learned a tremendous amount of humility, because, we had so many plans and we had so many things that we wanted to do. And God said, oh, okay, that's very nice that you have plans, but I have plans of my own, so good luck. We learned about unity. We learned what it means to support one another, about even when we can't physically be together, we found ways to be together. And we learned also about the commitment to Torah, the commitment to Judaism, to not throw it all away, and to not say, oh, you know what, it's all over, who needs this? No, we found ways to improve our performance of mitzvos, to improve our Torah study, to take the resources that are in front of us, like the Zoom, and to use it and channel it for the better, to make ourselves better Jews and better people. And that's why I think that this piece of the Orach Chaim is so important, not only, of course, before Shavuos, but now in general. To give us strength, to give us chizuk, and to say that, you know what, thank God there's light at the end of the tunnel. We see it end to this coming, and it's gonna be challenging. By the way, it's gonna be not so simple right away. So we're gonna figure out how to make it work. I see we have a chat here. Yeah, it's hard to like. I just think back of how much, you know, and I'm just thinking like the first time we go back to shul and I have to roll the Torah scroll, how much I have to roll it, because it's been that long since the Torah was used. And I looked, I was walking in the, you know, I come to the shul every day to check on things, and in the hallway we have a like a big poster for an event we were supposed to have, a community-wide Yom HaShoah event on April 21st. And we thought that we might have been able to pull it off. That's more than a month ago. That's crazy. But we're here. We're still here. God willing, we should all have our health. And God willing, we should all get back to some sort of normal, albeit a very, very new normal. So again, I wish everybody should have a wonderful Shavuos. 2 days of Yontif. It's a great opportunity, again, to maybe recommit to Torah and say to yourself, you know what, this year, maybe I want to study something new, or I want to take upon myself. And I am completely open to helping anybody who wants to take on something and tell you exactly what I think the best way to do it, to help you along that type of journey and say, I want to study Navi, I want to study Rashi, I want to study law, whatever it might be. And I'm perfectly willing and able to help anybody who wants to undertake that journey. But you know what? This, for me, I have to say, this group has been a great source of inspiration for me, because first of all, it makes me get dressed, or at least put a shirt on. You know, you don't always, you know, I'm not got the Zoom outfit on. No, today I'm really dressed. I have to go do a funeral, so I'm wearing pants too. But to get that and to say that, you know what, nothing can take away the Torah that we study in this group. Nothing can take away the camaraderie that we've developed, and I look forward. And God willing, by the way, when we can open up, and even if it's going to be outside, we'll have the ability to sit outside, separated, and study outside, which is a nice thing. But it's a nice thing to be in person. I'll be honest, I don't like teaching in this format. It is what it is. I don't like it's very hard because, you know, we feed a lot off the body language, etc. But I look forward to when we could be together again in person. So again, I hope that on this Shavuos, you'll look back and you'll value the time you had with your family and the time you had to sort of like think and get things straight. But soon enough, we'll be back at it. So again, wish everybody Chag Sameach. Again, I'm sorry that I got to cut a little short because I have to go do this funeral. But thank you, everybody, and wish everybody a wonderful, wonderful Yontif.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chag Sameach.